Welcome to the Exceptional Educators Podcast by Frontanalytics EDU, where innovation meets inclusion in education. I'm your co-host, Antonia Ellis.
And I'm Matt Giovanello, the CEO and co-founder of Frontanalytics. At Frontanalytics, we put special education and English language learners front and center. Our award-winning Frontanalytics EDU platform helps streamline progress monitoring, improve communication and compliance, and offers truly personalized learning to your students of all abilities.
Each episode of our podcast features candid conversations with district and school leaders, classroom changemakers, edtech founders, and industry executives, all dedicated to transforming learning for each student, especially our learners with unique abilities. With a focus on extraordinary educators and the exceptional students they serve, we explore the latest in special education, accessible technology, and inclusive leadership. Joining us today is Kyle Newton, Superintendent of Warren Local School District in Washington County, Ohio. With over a decade leading the district, Kyle has guided decisions around facilities, finances, and educational programming. His leadership focus on aligning operations, instructional growth, and community backing to ensure students have what they need to succeed. Welcome to the podcast, Kyle. We're so excited to have you today.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. This should be fun.
So we start off with asking, what is your why? What brought you to education and what keeps you here?
I think my why is to really unlock our students, their future and ensure that they get to where they need to be. My whole adult life, I've been in rural Southeastern Ohio, and this is a place where you're going to see the kids that you educate after they graduate. There's a good chance that they're going to live in your community or be nearby. I just went through a process with a local community college looking at our workforce in the next 5 to 10 years. And the statistic that I keep coming back to is 70% of the people that live in the counties in Southeastern Ohio were born in the counties that they are in. National average is like less than 35. So when you're talking about, you better be preparing people to be in the community that you're in because you're going to be spending a lot of time with them. It's super important. Not only as an educator, are you trying to shape the future, but we are shaping our local future when you're talking about rural education.
Kyle, it's so fascinating to hear how the majority of your life's work and your time in education leadership has been in these rural districts. As you pointed out, running a rural district is markedly different than running a district in most other areas of the country. So let's get into that a little bit. You might not know any differently, but I have the sense that you do. Tell us a little bit about what the dynamics of your area of Southeastern Ohio looks like from running a rural district perspective.
I haven't had cell, so I think only 3 years ago, I could drive home and have cell service the whole time. That is something that sometimes people don't even recognize. And Ohio is a super diverse state. Obviously, education is very personal to every state. So when you're talking about education in general, I'm sure as this is a national type conversation, we got 3 people from 3 different states on this conversation. Education is very different in every state. Appalachia is an interesting culture, stretching from the Northeast all the way down to, Alabama, Arkansas, that type of area. And it is a very unique culture in itself. So you throw in those 2 dynamics of being rural. Our district's 200 square miles, no traffic lights. That's big. 8 townships. And in Ohio, most school districts the average school district is 60 square miles. So we're more than 3 times the average school district. Our problems are different. And when I was younger in my career and becoming an administrator, and I would sit at the legislative level and have conversations around policy and advocate different ways, really was striking to me that there is a difference between urbans and suburbans and their problems, their funding structures, what they have to support them, and how in rural districts, it's all about collaborative and creative problem solving. Our dollar is not going to stretch the same way because we have so many people that are doing more than one job to accomplish our mission. And I have a very small central office staff. So I know the details of the district well, and that's just what every small district has to deal with.
So for someone like me, I grew up in Boston, went to school in Boston, moved to Texas when I was in high school. So definitely 2 different dynamics, but I have more memory of my experience in Texas. Like I can't even keep count of how many, and then the districts are all doing so many different things.
I would tell you first and foremost, if you have the opportunity to live in a small community, but still have the amenities that, crave, those third spaces, those things that you really want to do when you're not doing your job. It is a whole different feeling when you go to the grocery store or when you're getting gas at the gas station and you literally just pick your head up and you're like, yep, I know everybody that's here. When I went through the building project that we went through and we reorganized what we were going to do educationally into one facility, one campus, 3 buildings, one of the first things that I said was we have to be able to accommodate everything that happens within our community. Because when people go and walk their dog, when people go and ride their bike, when people go and have a picnic or do things that you would do with your kids, you're coming to our campus to do that. This is what it is to be in a rural community. And that idea of relationships and family and all those things, you have to be guarded because sometimes you'll be like, wait, are you related to that person? But also too, the idea of you just do what's right because it's going to be what's right. I don't play games like that. I'm a very straightforward person. The person that I am right now talking to you is the person that I am when I just had a conversation with my second grade teacher before this conversation. So, that idea of how you lead and what you do definitely comes out when you're at a rural school district.
I think that authenticity is important in education and educational leadership regardless, but it seems to be you have no other option in the way that you're running your district. And I hope and I imagine that your staff are grateful and your community are grateful as a result of that. However, it also means that you can't run, you can't hide. Like all eyes are on you always, and you better be doing the right thing because people will sniff you out in a half a second flat. That can be really hard when you're running a school district, especially when not every decision that you make is popular. So as it relates to community expectations and the way that you're trying to drive the district forward, what are some of the things that you grapple with on a regular basis, Kyle? And what are some of the things maybe in the next couple of years that you anticipate needing to face as you're either trying to secure funding or, rally the troops within your district that are teaching your students in relation to innovation that maybe the community might be at odds with?
When you talk about like, how do you build what you want to do? Longevity is one of the things. I'm blessed. This is my 13th year within this district and gotten my school board to build the relationships I needed with those 5 individuals to get them to trust me. But the other thing is you have to have a purpose. To me, one of the first things that you have to do is you have to understand what your community needs and wants. I have a mindset that it's about the kids, it's not about the adults. And if you have that mindset, it's about the students, it's about them. And when it's brought to me, my principals know, frontline administrators know, I will say, is this an adult problem or is this a kid problem? And if it's a kid problem, let's talk about it. Let's fix it. And if it's adult problem, we're not going to talk about it. Like that's an adult problem. We're going to have those tough conversations because we're here for the kids. We're not here for the adults. We need to make sure that they know that we are supporting them. Now, as an administrator, 100%, especially as a superintendent, I don't get to deal with the kids on a daily basis. I deal with the adults. So it's a balance, but it's always having that kind of sense in your mind of why you're doing your job.
You make so many good points, Kyle, whether it's community, whether it's managing adult problems versus child problems, whether it's the lessons that you learned as a result of COVID and needing to bring learning in an emergency remote environment and then back to the school and things that came out of that, both good and bad. But one piece in particular that we don't necessarily talk about as often as it relates to community, and that's your branding. I know not too long ago, and Local released updated branding, released new messaging. Tell us a little bit about that process and that experience and how one does connect to another, in your opinion.
I got to Warren 13 years ago. One of the first conversations I had with a community member was, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm against the bond issue, which is in Ohio, bond issues are to build buildings. And we had old buildings that were from the 60s and falling apart. We don't generate enough funds to maintain our physical our capital. Like we just don't generate enough funds to do that. You're throwing good money against bad. It just doesn't work. You don't have the population growth to be able to add on to buildings and change buildings and renovate. So you're having to deal with old building. And so you went after multiple bond issues before I got here for 15 years. And it really divided the community. And I came in and said, okay, how am I going to repair that? How am I going to do that? So truthfully, I said, we have a great mascot, very unique. When Ohio went through consolidations in the 60s, we consolidated, and that's why we're so big. But we have a warrior, which is carrying a spear, has a hat on, has a helmet, riding a Pegasus. I would say we're probably the only ones that are a warrior riding Pegasus kind of mascot. Just doesn't happen. So I got a graduate from every decade that I knew were influential people within the community. I got a couple of teachers and put together a committee and said, we're going to rebrand and we're going to pick our colors. We're going to make sure that once we have our brand and then we're going to protect our brand. Instead of saying that anybody can make a t-shirt from us, no, you have to go through actually a pretty rigorous process. We trademarked what we needed to trademark, and they have to ask. And you only get a year contract. And if you don't do a good job, I don't go back to you. So right there, when you walk into our football game and you look at our bleachers and then you look at the away bleachers, everybody's got royal blue on. It's not like we send out a note home that says, hey, everybody wear blue. Everybody was wearing blue. And then that trickled into, I'm a warrior. And what does it mean to be a warrior? And then we did our we call it our portrait of a warrior, which is what's the heart of a warrior? What's the mind of a warrior? What's the soul of a warrior? And really honed in on those things that we want our graduates to have and kind of just kept that going. And then when we passed our bond issue, because I think we were finally a united community, through that process, we ended up actually closing out small elementaries and consolidating one campus. And truthfully, our community supported that. And the reason they supported it, because they knew that by doing that and by having the right conversations with the right people, we knew that operationally, we could offer more things educationally. And by saying that and by being efficient and putting the schools at the right location at our high school campus area and creating that, truthfully consolidating and becoming one hub, it has changed the way that our community thinks. When I want to change our literacy program, people trust that we're going to do what's best for students, and we can do that, and we can evolve educationally because they trust what we're doing, and we have the track record now to show that.
I'm just kind of curious, have you had any parents or any community members who are like, no, we're really not a fan, we really don't want you to do this? Or has everybody just always been like, oh yeah, let's just do it because we love the superintendent, we want to do whatever he says?
I will say this, when you're passionate, and you can tell, I'm one of those kind of people, I'm excitable. So when I talk about the things that I'm going to do for your kid, and I say, listen, by getting us on one campus, I can do more for your kids. It's about your kids. And it's not about this tradition of, I don't want to lose my old school. I'm very transparent. I had the numbers. I'm a numbers person, spreadsheets, love those things. And I can remember stats. So when somebody says, well, what would it take to renovate this building? I'd be like, it's 4 times the cost than to build a new elementary school. And not only when we build the new elementary school, we're going to be able to offer programming that you guys can't get right now because operationally, when we spread our funds, we're not able to supply what we need to supply. But before I had that conversation, it was all about like every elementary school had a different mascot. You know, one was the Dragons, one was the Panthers, one was the Eagles. And I'm like, no, we're all warriors. Like I painted over those things. One summer, that all went away and everybody went to blue and white. After we went through the rebranding, it was just part of that process. Now, do I ultimately bring those things back together? Absolutely. There's a hallway I purposely designed in the elementary school that has every one-room schoolhouse in the district on it. I call it Sid's Wall because Sid Breckenridge, one of my former board members, went through and did all this historical work on it. It shows all where they all were. And believe me, we have people in all the time to take pictures, to talk about, oh, I remember going to this school. And then in the high school, we have another wall, which has all our old brands on it. Then we have the plaques of all those old schools that you see at the front entrance. And it is a great homage to what we did. But it's one of those things where it's always about moving forward and what do we do to move forward educationally, operationally, and then being very transparent about that.
Kyle, taking a tiny bit of a different spin on this, because you brought up numbers and spreadsheets and knowing this data like the back of your hand, I think a little bit of a different angle on the operating a rural school district perspective. We're on a podcast about special education, so I'm going to take a quick spin and then I will boomerang back to our current discussion. I think, if I'm not mistaken, your special education enrollment by percentage is about half of what it is in a more traditional school setting, whether it's suburban, urban, or just a different area of the state of Ohio or around the country. That's a blessing and a curse, as I'm sure you know. It's helpful to have the right staff in place, but even with a lower headcount of students with disabilities, their needs can typically be quite diverse. So when you're looking to your left and looking to your right and realizing your resources might not be within arm's reach, what are you doing to best support those students, even if those staff members might not be in your community?
We're at about 11% special ed in our district. Compared to an urban or compared to any other rural districts in Ohio is about half or maybe 2/3. Definitely not where it's typical. And why is that? As superintendent, you know that, like I said, I've been here for more than a decade. Kyle, that's on your watch. These are students that have been all the way through. This year's seniors have never known not me. So a couple of key points. When you're in a small district, you only have one educational psychologist. Okay. There's only one ed psych. That ed psych who is dealing with special ed identification is going to be a gatekeeper. So you have to make sure that that gatekeeper understands what you want as a philosophy within your district. And truthfully, for the last decade before 2 years ago, I had one that was extremely hard to get through. It slowed down our process, and that caused us to have a very low special ed count. We really should be around, instead of about 11.5%, we really should probably be around 15. So that means we're under-identified by 4%. Is that a big deal? Absolutely. Funding is based on, categorical funding is based on, there's only a couple categories where you get additional funding, special ed being the largest. So we're probably underfunded by about $400,000 within our district. And it's something I talk about all the time. And, instead of being at 1.3, 1.2, 1.4 million, we're at 900,000. That's not enough money to fund what we need to be able to do special ed wise. That right there means that what do you do to deal with that? Unfortunately, or fortunately, because we are one of those places that people move into, we have high regular class sizes. So by pushing our class sizes up a little bit, I can then still put resources towards special ed. So my special ed teachers, my ISs, and my resource / cross categorical, if you think of special ed as, I try to get as many kids in the regular classroom as possible, but we do have for students with disabilities that are like more DD level, we don't send a lot of kids to school HED. They're in our own schools. So we have units in every single level from that perspective. And we have a great process for that. I essentially have inflated my special ed teacher numbers and what I also call programs teachers that give me the ability to do those small groups and pullouts because I have a little bit larger class sizes. Then the next thing to do is you have to have a very strong MTSS process at the elementary level. And you really have to dig down to where students need help. And it doesn't matter if they're special ed, it doesn't matter what they're doing, but you have to run personalized groups, differentiating instruction outside of regular instruction in ELA and math, especially up till 4th grade. And I have a master teacher at the elementary level that is my elementary principal. She unwillingly agreed every year. I reconvince her that you are the best person for this job because she is not an administrator by trade. She is a teacher. She is the most lovely person when it comes to instruction, but she is fierce when she knows what she's doing when she walks into any of her classrooms. She can walk in there and be like, nope, or yep, this is exactly what you should be doing for your students right now. And having the ability to have somebody at the elementary level build the right foundation around an MTSS process, around character development, and now she's got a partner in crime in her assistant principal that they are just one of the greatest 1-2 punches to be able to do that operational side and build the character aspect of what students need. That changes what you do. I'm a high school math teacher, okay? I don't know anything about teaching literacy other than what I have learned by watching my teachers. But I understand that you have to have that foundation. And I know that you have to go out as an administrator, as a leader, and find the best people for those jobs and not be afraid that they're going to know more than you, because I want them to know more than me. And that's what I have at my elementary team. So when you say, how do you deal with that? I have overcompensated with staff in comparison to ratios. And then I have also created an MTSS. And when I say not really me, but my people have created an MTSS process that makes sure that we reach our students and differentiate their instruction at those lower levels. So I went in and started talking with teachers, and I started really interviewing and asking some hard questions for everybody that was less than 5 years in the district. And I asked them, what are the roadblocks in your classroom? Because as an administrator, the most important thing you can do is remove those roadblocks. Because if a teacher can do what they need to do in their classroom, then there's nothing else to do. If they're like, I don't have enough time to go to the bathroom. Well, what do you mean you don't have enough time to go to the bathroom? Let's drill down on that. Like, is the bathroom too far away? Is it, what is it about that? And stop dealing with the symptoms of the problems and deal with the real freaking problems. And so I ask that same question to my teachers every time. And that class size has come up multiple times over the conversations. And I say to them, we're a district that people want to live in. So I can't not have this many core classes because we don't have empty classrooms. We're full. Like, our buildings are full. I go through and I'm very transparent. And I say, how many people are on your team? And I just interviewed, it's funny you said 2nd grade. I just interviewed a 2nd grade teacher this morning, had a conversation with her. And her name's Abby Cole. And I said, Abby, what's the hardest thing in your class? She's like, having 24 kids is really tough, or 25 or 26. She's last year at 29. And I'm like, yeah, that's tough. And I said, how many people are on your team? And she's in second grade and we have 6 regular core classes. Okay. And she goes, oh, I got 8 people on my team. I said, so you feel like your team is 8 strong? And she's like, I would probably say 9 strong. We only have 6 core classes, but she really believes that she has 9 people on her second grade team. Well, when you to do the math again and you divide that, it's down to 15, 16, 17. It's just in her core class of so the idea of this is she believes that she has a full team that is supporting her, including the administration. She had great things to say about the administrative support that they have, that those people are there to help her. And it's one of those things that it's like teachers might say it because they don't know what else to say. But when it comes right down to it, we are providing the supports they need. Is it weird? Sometimes. She's a more veteran person, 15 plus years. But when I'm having conversations with my young people, my people that are less than 5, they know no different. And I always say, what's your future plans in education? That's my last question that I've been asking. And not one of them are like, I want to leave. And if anything, they're like, I want to stay at Warren. How do I stay at Warren? What do I need to do? That's a good feeling, meaning that we are providing what we need to provide. So it is a transition, but it's about being clear and telling people why. And then the data and the MTSS and the other things will support what you're doing. It's really hard to argue with data. When your kids are still growing, or the ones that aren't, and you identify and then you change and then try something different, just don't say it louder and again, those are the things that getting that specialized professional development around that changes, and they believe and they see and they feel that it just becomes part of the culture.
Kyle, this is fascinating. You're bucking the trend because the statistics out there of teacher burnout and teacher turnover, and more importantly, administrative burnout and turnover and superintendent burnout and turnover. I think from the beginning part of our conversation, you're coming into year 13 at Warren local schools alone. That is the complete antithesis of superintendents typically turning over 50% or more after only 3 years in their district. So you're doing so many things right. And it's awesome to hear about the specific ways in which you're supporting your staff. I want to get a little bit more into that second grade teacher interview example where there are 9 people that she believes are on her team supporting her and all of the kids that she serves. How does that then transcend into the MTSS supports that you've built out over the years, and that process around special education that you said you wanted to talk a little bit more about? Those are 2, of course, especially intriguing areas of interest. Help us kind of pull the curtain back on what those look like a little bit more for your kids.
So it's about finding the right curriculum too. I really believe in having a process. Okay. I believe in succinct programming. So the days of where a teacher can just close their door and be on an isolated island and do whatever they want are gone, because you're not going to have the return on your investment that you're going to really need. And you have to think of things like that. What's the return on our investment? We have a very short time with these students and we have to make gains. A teacher that might really like that one lesson on DC and it has nothing to do with what we're doing, I'm sorry, we can't do that. To me, it's about choosing the right curriculum. The other thing is we just switched over to Amplify in math. It's a newer program. It is all about hands-on, getting students to collaborate with each other when they're younger, then collaborate when they're older using technology. I love that. That idea of when they start having, and again, systematic, succinct programming, because nomenclature is so important in education. As a high school math teacher, I would say something, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to say this word. Do you guys know what it means? And I'll be like, man, why isn't the 5th grade teacher using the same word as me? And that cross-curricular ideas of really thinking about that and having a true platform all the way across the district. And even when you have these conversations with very affluent school districts, and you know who they are in your communities, and I know who they are in Ohio, and I say to them, what's your platform that you use in this? And they're like, well, we really don't. It's because they don't need to, and yet they still have very, very high growth. For me, my sister teaches kindergarten in a suburb. And I say to Katie all the time, I'm like, Katie, how many kids knew how to read before they got to your class? And she's like, man, it's a bad class this year. I have 3 that don't know how to read. And, read, whatever she's considering that to be. And I'm like, if I have 3 that know how to read in kindergarten in one of my classes, that's a big win. So it's about creating those processes that go all the way through. And then once you have that process, about having your teachers understand the flexibility of reteaching, regrading, redoing those things, and then getting students the education that they need at time. And then spending the time about differentiation and constantly looking at that data and then restructuring for those support classes. Is it a lot of work? Absolutely. But what I spent a lot of time putting in supplementals for teachers. I'm a big supplemental. I want to pay you for what you do outside of your classroom. That might be greater leadership, coaching, in any way that you engage your students or help staff. I want to pay you for it. So we have lots of people that are doing that, especially at the elementary level, that are in charge of all the regrouping. We have lots of teams that are getting that little bit of extra money for the supplemental so that you can meet about these students and really talk about them. It's that piece that goes on and on. And I will say that from the special ed perspective, when I got here, the pendulum had swung all the way back to, we want to pull out as many students. These aren't mine. They aren't mine. They're somebody else's. Well, nobody says that anymore. These are my kids. My kids are my kids. And actually, the flexible grouping is probably the hardest thing for teachers to relinquish that piece. But I will say, once the evaluation system got rid of growth, which was a huge piece to this, I've been around long enough that I've seen that come back and forth, that when we got rid of the growth aspect, teachers were much more willing to share students, because then you weren't worried about I'm the only one influencing their growth. How's that going to reflect in my evaluation? So once we got rid of that a couple years ago, it really helped the idea of sharing students. Then the special ed aspect of things is we have a school age DD in our county. And in Ohio, school age DD is county-based. But our school age DD students want to go to Warren because we have cool programming. We want them in our schools. We do a really good job of making sure that they feel at home as much in our building as anywhere else. And we take that as a point of pride. And all the way through, it's about growing those students and transitioning them to be able to be functioning members of our community as well. And it's not my thing. I'm, again, a high school math teacher, so I'm not a special ed person, but understanding that these students are the students that we need to make sure that we're intertwining with the rest of our students so that they feel culturally connected and that they're part of our community is super important to me. And we have very good programming that goes all the way through to where we have a classroom that's actually in Marietta, which is, sitting next door on Marietta College's campus, which we have. Our students then can go and take college classes, have mentors that are from the college, that are college students that are doing internships and working in the businesses that they can then walk to. So we start young and then have this thing that they can go to till they're 23. And then again, we try to get all of our middle level special needs students, the tier 2, tier 3s, in the classrooms. We try to pull them out as low as possible, unless it's just for reteaching. And this year I had my high school staff said we're doing no resource rooms at all. So we have no resource at the high school level, which is pretty crazy, because you're talking about, even though that was a small percentage of students, when we're saying we're going to push them back into the regular classroom and we're going to take that experience on with those teachers and that they want that, it's changed a mindset for them and for the students. So it's pretty exciting. It's the whole idea of providing student agency all the way through, not just for our best students, but also for our students that struggle.
Kyle, I'm fascinated by the positive outlook and the success stories of your special education program and your MTSS programs, especially in light of being in a rural district, going back to the conversation at the beginning of today's episode, where resources could be scarce, and yet you're not letting that stop you. I think that, not to cast blame or judgment or to bucket other districts who may not have a successful special ed programs and them using, we're a rural district as, a scapegoat or an excuse or a reason, but you certainly aren't. And it's amazing to see that even with the under-identification and the desire to properly identify students, you're still meeting the needs of those who are identified where they are, helping them grow along the way, building out really innovative and unique programs, trying not to put students in resource room or in a self-contained program if they don't need it, and making sure that you are doing the proper investments into special education because these students so desperately need it. They deserve it, and they do too. It's fascinating. It's refreshing. We don't hear that every day. And so I appreciate you sharing all of those stories and examples of what's going right in your district. I hope they serve as a bit of a blueprint for others to follow in the years ahead as well. We are entering the end of our time. This conversation flew. We didn't even get to some of the other conversation topics about coalition of rural and Appalachian schools. So maybe let's super quickly get to that, and then I'll wrap up with my final question for you. Tell us more about what your involvement in that organization looks like.
I'll tell you, as a superintendent, especially somebody who's been around enough and knowing how Ohio is designed in its funding and its legislation, the Ohio legislator has so much control over what happens in our schools, just like every state. And as a rural school district, sometimes your voice isn't as strong as what it needs to be because there's some school districts where they have 2 representatives and they're like, yeah, I got 2 guys. They're mine. And I'm like, oh, we share one amongst 8 of us, that kind of thing. But what we have decided to do in Ohio is we have a coalition of rural and Appalachian schools in Ohio. And we're not just Appalachia, but Northwest Ohio is very similar to us. And we're growing. We went from 30 school districts. We've always had about 110. And then we started this idea of advocacy. You know what? We're going to really advocate and we're going to lobby specific legislation around rural schools because we are different. We need to make sure that we're protecting our funds so that somebody doesn't make an uninformed decision and it hurts rural schools. Because so many times urbans have so much more control. And in Ohio, we have urbans that, we call it the Big 8. The Big 8 has a lot of control over what happens in the legislature. And then you have this other group from the wealthy schools called the coalition. And that group has a lot of control over what, they've always been lobbying for the last 30 years. They've all lobbied. Well, you had all these rural schools, which is the majority that are sitting there on our hands because we didn't know any better. Well, we said, we're going to stop doing that. So now we have over almost 150 schools that have banded together and we are constantly meeting. I was on a Zoom yesterday and what we do is we talk, we collaborate, and we realize that the things that are the same in Warren are the same in Northwest Ohio. And, it doesn't matter the rural, it is the rural. So the idea of being the hub of the community and having to stretch resources, but the idea of collaboration and truly making it about a fraternity, about superintendents and treasurers and school leaders, because when we know each other and we can help each other. Yesterday, I was having a conversation. I'm a big CCP guy. We didn't even talk about high school stuff, but truthfully, I'm most passionate about pathways and transitions to real life. And we were talking about College Credit Plus, which is taking college class at the high school level. And this one superintendent, and I could tell he was, newer in his career. And he was like, does anybody know anything about that? And literally everybody kind of looks at the square that I'm in and was like, you just get offline and talk to Kyle about that because he knows more about that stuff than anybody else. And me and this other guy have written legislation on that, Mark Kresher, a good super friend of mine. And to be able to collaborate around things like that, and then to try to shape legislation so that it is productive and doesn't hurt us and maybe even helps us is what we are having to do in Ohio. Because right now in education, one of the things you said is there any topics that are off the table? And one of the things that I would say is no, everything's on the table. But I could see how somebody might be very, very hesitant to talk about politics when it comes to education. And to me, I'm not trying to sway a person one way or the other. But the realities of it is this: at every state, you have to fight for every dollar that you get educationally. And if it's not that way, tell me which state that is. I'm going to go there. Because in Ohio, it's that way. And resources are scarce. So you have to make sure that everything's structured, which means building relationships with your legislators and with your other people within your county so that everybody understands why you have to do what you have to do and what you do matters. So it not only means that I have to go and have this, I think of it like facing 2 different directions at the same time. I have to be focused on my district, but I can't let that be my only focus. I have to turn and say, I need to collaborate with everybody else that is around me, because if I don't, I won't be able to do what I need to do with my district. And having that partnership and really then focusing and talking about it, and then saying to somebody, did you write your legislator? And sending an email out and being able to say, here's the letter I sent. Use AI, make it better for you. I have a running thing that I have with my treasurer about all the stuff that's going on, and I can quickly write any letter about anything that I need to talk about because I know our district, I know our cost per student, I know what we're getting from the state level, I know what we get locally, and then I can talk about that and have those talking points ready to go. That idea of being able to collaborate and do that is huge. And if I can carry some water for people that can't carry the water right now because they're young in their career or because they got stuff going on, I'm more than willing to do that because I know when I can't, they will for me. And that's kind of like the weird mindset that you have to be on when you're in a rural district.
That's such a sweet mentality and such a selfless and, pay it forward mentality that I think you're learning is a necessity in order to be successful and to best serve your students and to best grow your district. It's amazing to hear how that 150 plus district coalition has just grown so grassroots over the years and how you're all benefiting from each other's camaraderie and support. I think it's fascinating. And I hope that it serves as yet another example that no one told you okay, it's time to build a coalition. You took it upon yourselves and you're all better off for it. So for other rural districts, and we know they're everywhere, if they don't have a coalition or if they don't have support through their ESC, if they don't have support through their state legislature. This is a great way of doing it yourself. Like, you don't need permission to build this coalition. If you're in another part of the country and don't have something like it, just, you can do things. To go ahead and do it. And it's awesome to hear how that all just happened. And now, what started from a couple dozen districts has now grown to literally hundreds across Ohio. That's so cool.
Yes, that is a great way of saying it. Absolutely.
It's fascinating. But Kyle, as we wrap up today's episode, one more question for you that we like to ask all of our guests. What does being an exceptional educator or being an exceptional leader mean to you?
I would say for me, being an exceptional leader or an exceptional educator is knowing that it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about my kids. It's about the team. And truthfully, for me, it's about the community.
I love that. So well put.
I have to just chime in. I really wanted to ask you about your Just Keep Swimming model. But
Yes.
truly, you embody it with everything. You don't leave anybody behind. You make sure your teachers understand everything that's going on. Same with the community. You are clear about your vision, the next steps, and you're willing to explain without over-explaining, but explain it enough to where people can understand and say, you know what? I trust you. I'm willing to watch and sit back and just trust that you have our best interests at heart because you care about the kids first. And it's clear. It truly is clear. Every response, every move that you have made, at least the ones that you have talked to us about, it's always kid-centered. So I just kind of want to applaud you. I really love how you just move within your communities. Just beautiful. I just want to give you your flowers on that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Kyle, thank you. This was such an enlightening episode. It was amazing to hear your very unique perspectives of how you are doing rural school leadership right. And I just hope that this serves as a blueprint for others leading rural districts or for those who wanted a little more insight as to how the majority of our school districts here in Ohio and around the country operate. You gave us an inside look. And so for that, I appreciate you for all of the work that you're doing to support your next generation of learners, your educators, your building leaders, and your community. You are doing exceptional work. You are exceptional. And we're just so grateful to have you here this morning. Thank you again for lending your voice and showing us how to lead the way in rural Ohio. We so appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Matt.
My pleasure. For everybody listening to this morning's episode of the Exceptional Educators Podcast, thank you again for joining us, and we will see you on our next episode.